Thank you for inviting me, Nadia, to address your class. This is an exciting opportunity for me, and I hope we'll all learn something about teams, about high-performing teams, and teams in healthcare settings. I have done research in healthcare on the topic of teams and team development, and so I'll be talking some about that. But basically, what I'm going to be talking about is how to create high performing teams. What is a high performing team, and what you can do on your own jobs to try to be a part of an effective team and lead a high performing team. This presentation comes out of material research that I've done, some at University Hospital actually, as well as elsewhere on first-time leaders of groups. And in fact, it's a book that I wrote with my wife Marilyn, who's the Assistant Dean for Academic Medical Education in the School of Medicine. And this was published by Josie Bass. So it's a book about leadership and group leadership, particularly small group leadership. And I've also done quite a bit of work on learning, individual learning and group learning, and what it means for a group to learn. And that's something we'll be talking about later. And if you read the fable, you know quite a bit about that already. It was a cute story, but very, very pertinent. Um, and pertinent to what it means to be a high performing team and to be a learning team. The idea of a group learning, just as individuals learn, groups are, of course, individuals, and the group itself can learn and be more effective. So we'll be talking about what that means as we move on. So I am just, if you heard the introduction that we recorded a few days ago, um, you know that I am a professor in the College of Business. I have a joint appointment in psychology. My training is in psychology. I'm what's called an industrial and organizational psychologist. Some people just call it an organizational psychologist these days. But my PhD is in psychology from Ohio State University, which was unfortunately in the news today, but we won't go into that. And I have been studying groups and group dynamics for many years. My principal interest is in how people work with each other, perceive each other, and make decisions about themselves and other people in organizations. And so I'm interested in issues of employee selection, performance appraisal, giving feedback, being open to feedback and receiving feedback, using that information for career development purposes. And in terms of the current lecture and discussion, I'm interested in it from the standpoint of, uh, I'm sorry, I was just looking at Nadia's note, but I guess that's not for me. So please bear with me as I adjust to this new mode of delivery. Interested in group dynamics and how groups learn over time and do the work that they're supposed to do. This is important for several reasons. And let me turn to the first slide. In today's world, whether it's business, healthcare, or most any other kind of organization, a lot of work gets done in teams with people working together. And there are a lot of reasons for that. You can see in this slide I've listed a few of those reasons. You need in a group you need people with different expertise, and you have to bring them together to do the work that needs to be done. You can think of any healthcare team, whether it's in a hospital setting or other kind of healthcare arena. Yeah, you might be working alone to some extent, maybe totally in terms of delivering service to a patient, but at the same time, you are coordinating with a primary care doctor or specialty doctors or other technicians and so forth and so on in an integrated way. And often this happens as you do your work. So you're part of a work team And on the other hand, it might be that you're part of a special team that's been brought together for a particular purpose that just has meetings now and then, maybe regularly, maybe semi-regularly, in order to accomplish a particular task. So you might be on a quality improvement team. Uh, Perhaps some of you have done that before. You might be on a some kind of project team to implement some kind of new type of healthcare. You might be on a team to design a new healthcare process, or maybe a new office process within the office in which you work. So that's a temporary team, one that's focused on a particular goal, one that needs to have its task completed within a certain length of time. And sometimes the goal might not be that evident. You know, there might be something wrong. We need to investigate what's going on here. We need to try to improve the situation. But going into the group, you don't know exactly what you're going to do. And so what you do in terms of focusing on this goal and this work process is bring together the people who have some knowledge and expertise, who can make a difference, who can contribute to the group, because they have information, knowledge, experience, and so forth that's necessary to get the work done. So it might be because of their expertise, their experience, their function within the team and within the office, the discipline of training, whether you're a PA, a physical therapist, what have you, a technician, a physician, or what organization you come from. And you can think about organizations uh, in different in a particular area having to join together in order to make something happen. So maybe you're purchasing a new process from a vendor. Maybe you are coordinating work in different units across the organization or across different organizations. Maybe they're hospitals, maybe they are healthcare delivery offices, maybe they are clinics, and so you're working together. So okay, you get the idea that teams are important. A lot of work gets done within the team context, and it's pretty integrative. Um, so let's move on. I've just listed here different kinds of groups that occur in organizations today. So if you're thinking beyond healthcare, or maybe even within healthcare, um, these are the kinds of organization, no, kinds of teams that may be formed. So you can have a research and development team. You know, let's develop a new process, a new product, um, or let's build on somebody else's work. It could be a task force of some sort. We need to plan something. It could be an event. It could be, you know, the use of new equipment, new technology. We're going to implement new technology, and so we have how are we going to do that? What technology should we purchase? Let's say it's a system, a healthcare tracking system of some sort, information system. How do you integrate it into your office practice? How do you choose what you want to use? How are you going to train people in your office on that new system? And how are you going to implement it and track it and use it as effectively as possible? So you might establish a temporary task force to do that. A matrix organization structure is what I was talking about earlier. A matrix organization is one where you are working with people from different units, and you're working across organizational units in order to get something done that will benefit everybody. You could be on an advisory board, a committee. You've probably all been on different kinds of committees, or a subcommittee, a quality improvement team, as I mentioned before, or some other kind of team. Now, some teams are kind of loosey-goosey. They don't have a particular structure. They may have a leader. They may not have a leader. Other teams are very structured. And so I listed at the bottom there, you can see flight crews and surgical teams. You know, a flight crew anyway, flying an airline. If you think of that, everybody on the flight crew, from the stewards to the pilots and co-pilots and so forth, have their roles. They know exactly what they're supposed to do. It's very structured. And they may never have met before. And you've probably seen this happen, where you're going to get on an airplane and the crew gets on before you, and they come and they're meeting each other at the gate. They might say, oh yeah, we were on a flight a few months ago together, weren't we? But when they get on that plane, they have their role very well delineated, extremely spelled out so that they know just what to do. So, like that plane that landed safely in the Hudson, it was in part because of the experience of the pilot, certainly, and the right conditions and the environment, but also because everybody on that crew knew just how to behave and what to do, what their role was in this emergency and uncertain situation. And then you have membership organizations and clubs. And one thing I want to say about these, that if you're in a team and it's your natural work team, it's the people you work with on a daily basis. Well, you all report to the same supervisor, and you work together as coworkers, and so you're kind of used to that. You know each other very well, and you're managed, if you will. You have your roles, you have your job, you are evaluated by your supervisor, and so forth. And if your supervisor tells you to do something on that team, it's likely that you're going to do it. Now that is different than a team of volunteers. And if you think about a club or an organization, maybe some of you volunteer in your office to be on a task force, or maybe in your community or in your church or what have you, a religious organization, um, then you are a volunteer, and you don't have to be there. And if you don't like the leader, you can take it or leave it. You can walk away. You can speak your mind. And so leading a voluntary team like that is very different and sometimes more challenging than being a supervisor of a team, a natural work team, where roles are spelled out and delineated and people know just what to do. But so just to recap, a lot of work gets done in teams. That happens because you need people with different expertise, and you need more than one person to get the job done. The work is likely to be interdependent. People on the team are going to depend on each other, and they're there because they have some kind of knowledge to bring to the table. So the leader's challenge is trying to coalesce that team so that people work as effectively as possible. Okay, let me move on. Now, it's easy to say that, but there are lots of reasons why leading a team can be difficult. And so this slide indicates several of those. I've talked about volunteers before. Leading volunteers is kind of like herding cats, not always that easy. And if you've ever been on a group of volunteers, you know that people come to a group with different vested interests. They have different ideas about how to get things done. And their personalities seem to come out more so than they might on the job, because they can take it or leave it. They don't have to be there. And they may be there because of friends or other things. So, yeah, okay, great. Nadia has put on one of the questions, and excellent and perfect timing, and asked you what is the most challenging aspect of leading a team. And you indicated things like, okay, I guess you're going to do that now, so you can select one of those. Are we doing that, Nadia? Well, let me assume that you are responding to that poll. And while we're waiting for the answer, oh, okay. Yeah, you can put that up now. Why don't you put that up now, please? And if everybody who is online can respond to that poll, and we'll look at the answers in a few minutes. And as you're doing that, I'll continue talking about the slide. So I'm talking about why it's difficult. People have vested interests. Everyone's a critic. There may be naysayers in your team, people who just don't want to go along with things. You might be dealing with a geographically dispersed team, as we are today. You are all in different places, and if we think of this class as a team, that's one of the barriers we're trying to overcome. You all need to be able to hear me, to understand me, and have access to the system and so forth. So that's one of the things you need to break down. And you might have time pressure too, and that could be an issue. Okay, so I guess we're seeing the results, at least from several people who are online now. Somebody saying all of the above, a lot of you saying all of the above being challenging aspects of a team, and you're right, certainly. and promoting teamwork, which of course is basically what we're talking about. Getting people in sync, getting people to work together, getting people to understand the shared vision, the shared goal, and what they're trying to accomplish, and then working in a collaborative way so that people really feel they're helping each other, that they are contributing something that other people are not contributing, and they're working in a way that understands the interdependencies. Why people need to know what I can um, contribute to the team, and my understanding of what other people can contribute. So it's really important to have a good understanding of the people within your team, along with what you yourself can contribute. I'll give you a little, while we're on that topic, I'll give you a little um, hint of something you can do if you're leading a team. The first time you bring your team together, there's research that shows that one of the best things you can do, the very first moments you are meeting, is to go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves, but say why it is they are there and what background, what expertise, what experience they are bringing to that team. And the reason why that's effective is that it helps promote people's understanding of where each other is coming from and and how they can contribute, so that as issues arise, they'll know what expertise they have, and they'll see each other in the way they see themselves, and that can be very, very useful in making the team effective. Um, and research has shown that teams do much better when they do that right at the outset than if they kind of never do that or don't do that, and learn about each other in a more happenstance kind of way over time. So, okay. So I see 10 of you have now said all of the above to those different possibilities. And yeah, you're right. There's no one thing that could be the most challenging. It could be all of those or any of those at a given point in time. So if you think of a group that you belong to, just in your mind, think about these different questions. Is it a positive experience or negative if it's a group that you're in now? What is the leader like? What are the members like? Is the leader kind of authoritarian, directive, or is the leader very participatory and open to new ideas? What are the members like? Are they congenial? Do they work together effectively? Do they come to meetings on time? Are they happy about being in the group, or are they being told they have to be there? How does the leader treat the members, and how do the members treat the leader? Are they working together in a respectful way? Are they understanding of where they come from and the issues and their concerns? And if not, are they addressing those issues? Is the task and process clear? Do they know why they're there and what the group is supposed to be doing? Sometimes groups form, they're supposed to accomplish some kind of task, let's say plan an event to celebrate something. Let's talk about something fairly simple. Let's say you're going to have a birthday party for somebody in your office, or you're all going to go out for a retreat to do some kind of team building, if you will, within the group, and you're trying to plan that, but you don't know exactly what it's going to be, when it's going to be, how it's going to take place. You don't know the various aspects of it, and so you might flounder around before you come up with some conclusions. On the other hand, tasks can be very clear. If you've ever been on a quality improvement team in a hospital, I don't know if some of you work in a hospital setting, but at University Hospital at Stony Brook, Carol Gomes, for instance, is the director of the quality improvement initiatives within the hospital. This is mandated by JCO, and they have a process that people are trained in, where you come into the group, you're going to focus on some element of work within the hospital, let's say in the emergency room or a surgical team or whatever it is, and you're going to make an improvement. And you have to identify where improvements are needed and in what way they can be done. Well, if you've ever been on such a team, you know that it's a very structured process. And they tell you exactly, here's what we're going to do to identify the work process and its elements and how those elements fit together, and where there are barriers to accomplishing the goals effectively, what's going wrong. Let's collect some data to understand that. Let's identify some areas for improvement, and let's make it happen. So that's just That's just an example. Okay, and is the group accomplishing what it is supposed to? Those are elements of thinking about whether your group is successful or not. Okay, yeah, do you have any questions at this point? I'd be happy to entertain them, and I guess if you have some, just type them in the box, and uh, let's talk about it. So why don't you think about that? Feel free to type a question or two, and let me just pause for a minute and uh, see if you have any questions so far. Okay, so one question: what happens if your leader has trouble making decisions? And yeah, that's a big one. It depends on what kind of decisions, of course. Are they decisions about when the group's going to meet? Are they decisions about group process? Are they decisions about what outcomes the group is going to choose? Uh, Generally, if you're finding there's a problem of that sort, one thing you could do would be to discuss this within the group. Uh, and I'll be talking about this in a little while. It's good if the leader is amenable to this anyway, to take a step back and to talk about how the group is doing. So if you can say to your group members and the leader, let's take 5 minutes out. Suppose we take some time, maybe more than 5 minutes, to talk about how things are going. And so you don't have to point fingers at the leader per se, but you can talk about some of these issues. And one issue may be that decisions aren't being made, and it might lead to the question of, well, who's supposed to be making the decisions? Is it the leader? Is it maybe the leader wants more input from the members of the team, and that might be why you perceive your leader is not making decisions. You won't really know until you address that in some way that's non-evaluative and that doesn't put the leader on the spot and say, hey, you're not doing your job, but rather opens it up for group discussion. You hope you have a leader that does that, but a member can do it too. Okay, what if everyone in the group has a different perspective on how to achieve the goal at hand? And I've been in teams like this, particularly voluntary teams, where the leader doesn't have that much control, and that becomes much more difficult, of course. Um, uh, One thing you can do is go round robin and get everybody's opinion out on the table, so that it doesn't become hidden. It's not like a hidden agenda that people don't seem to agree, but you don't really know why. And I found that to be effective. At least it gets those issues out on the table. What if you have a leader who is unaware of the necessary processes, goals for the team to accomplish? And this is, as we're going to see in just a few minutes, this is really critical because the leader is supposed to have a clear concept of what it is you're trying to accomplish and be able to convey that, share it, develop a shared vision within the team. And if the leader's not clear about it, it's likely that the members are not going to be clear about it, and it's likely that each member of the team or several members are going to have different views of why they are there, and that's certainly going to be problematic. I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. What if you have a leader who is unaware of the necessary processes and goals for the team to accomplish? Okay, that's what we just talked about. And what if you have a leader who was appointed by someone higher in authority but is not respected by the team? Yeah, and this certainly happens. There's no question about it. Where an executive or someone higher placed commissions the team, appoints the leader of the task force, and then people are unhappy with that decision. That's likely to be an ineffective team because the members are not going to be committed to working with the leader, and that's definitely going to be a problem. It's going to be hard to overcome. Um, it may be the members have to get together separately without the leader to talk through how they're going to handle this, um, because maybe you're stuck there and you have to be on this team. You don't want to go around the leader necessarily to go up to the executive and say, hey, this person's just not going to be able to hack it, because that may not be a tactful thing to do. Um, so that's, you know, you're raising some thorny issues for sure. Okay, why don't we go on? And we can have, those are very good questions. Thank you. Um, and I hope some of these slides will help answer, or some of the concepts I'm going to raise will help answer those questions. Um, does every team need a leader? No, no. The answer to that is no. The roles that are needed in a team will depend upon what's going on in the team at the time. You can have a leaderless group, and what often happens is that leaders will emerge in the group. There's a whole body of literature called emergent leadership. Um, but the leader might not become the leader for all elements of the group. The leader, let's say at the beginning of a team, you need someone who's going to coalesce and help the team determine what direction they're going to be in. As the group continues its work, you're going to need someone who's going to um, help structure the process and the work methods you're going to use. It might be somebody else has more expertise in that area, and that person's leadership will emerge. And then at the end, you need someone who's going to help process what you've done and whether it was a good job, did we work together effectively, and somebody else might be better at that. And as a result, that person will emerge as the leader during that time period. But of course, it depends on personality as well. And some people are more aggressive in a team context. Other people are more reticent and they sit back and they don't contribute. So personality will make a difference. A leader can, of course, facilitate that process. And in some teams, you have a professional facilitator working alongside the leader to help people contribute, knowing that they have different personalities as well as different backgrounds. Okay, so let's move on. So I was talking about virtual distance before as a barrier. So okay, we'll move beyond that. Now, so I want to talk about the elements of leading a team. Um, okay, yeah, I'm just looking at Nadia's comment. I'm going to talk about 8 elements, but especially these first 4. Um, Preparing to lead consists of these 4 steps. So you identify the type of group you're leading, creating the keys to a high-performing group, and those keys, as you'll see, are talent, task, and time. 3, planning your group's development, and 4, determining your style of leadership. So I'm going to talk about each one of those elements. And then once you've done your planning and your preparation, there are 8 steps. Getting off to the right start, working smart, helping your group learn and in the process get better, and assessing your group's progress and achievements. So these are the elements of leading an effective team, a high-performing team, both preparing to learn and to lead, excuse me, and taking the lead. So let's talk about some of them in terms of preparing to lead. Consider a group you belong to. What are the challenges for group members, and what are the challenges for the leader? So think about that group I asked you to have in your mind earlier, or group that you're part of now. And why don't you just write down in the box what are some of the challenges for the group members? Why don't you do that first? To write out a few of the challenges that, in a team that you are actually a part of, that you perceive as a challenge for the members. Okay, speaking up with confidence. Yep, good one. Anybody else? Budget confines. Yeah. So the members are worried about having enough budget to get the work done. Effective communication, understanding the goal, lack of time. Time, yep, absolutely, that's an important element. Okay, time constraints, members checking emails, being distracted. Yeah, that's these days, multitasking is a real problem. And I'm sure you've been in many meetings where people sit there with their Blackberries or their iPhones and they're searching the internet or they are responding to email and so forth. You need to come up with some rules so that that doesn't happen. Okay, we lack focus, not having a strong leader, too many different opinions on how to tackle the problem at hand, efficient communication, making sure your points are taken the way you want them to. Yeah, having the time and being able to express yourself clearly and concisely so that people understand your viewpoint without hogging the floor. Moral or ethical dilemmas, well, we could talk about that in more depth. That's almost another lecture in and of itself. But good point. Okay, and now let's turn the tables around. What are the challenges for the leader of this team? So it might be perhaps you are the leader or somebody else is a leader. So think of it from the perspective of the leader. What are the challenges that the leader has? Being taken seriously without overwhelming the team, reaching consensus, yeah, an important one, creating an agenda that incorporates everybody in the team and keeping everybody involved, keeping the team focused on the task, especially in the long term, establishing cohesiveness among the team members, meaning do they get along, are they working together effectively, do they uh, give the same importance to the team. Um, okay, considering all team members' needs. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. Thank you. Uh, if you think about this team, this slide is a little bit off right over here. But anyway, being a good listener, excellent. Uh, if you want to evaluate the challenge in a team that you're part of, you could use this as a form or a little checklist, if you will. So I've listed 10 elements down the left-hand column that are elements that could be a challenge, or they are certainly characteristics of a team, and depending upon how they emerge, could be challenges. So if you think about that team you're on, and if we were in person, I'd probably hand this out and ask you to check or circle the box um, uh, over here. I don't know if you can see my. Can you see my arrow, Nadia? Can they see an arrow when I point to something? No. Okay, forget it then. If you look in the middle, if you basically, let's say you'd indicate the purpose of your team. Is it uncertain or certain? You'd circle one of those. The motivation of the members. Is the motivation low or high? The size of the group. Is it large or small? Diversity within the group, and you could talk about diversity in terms of ethnicity or gender or background and discipline. Is it diverse or not? Turnover. Hello.
Professor,
Yeah.
excuse me. If you want to point to something, there's an arrow at the bottom of your screen.
Oh yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay. So I just move it. Okay. So I just move it over. So I'm talking about this middle column. So basically, the more. Thank you, Nadia. The more you circle these elements, the more challenging the group is going to be to manage. And so if you have a 10, let's say, if you count up the number of uh, of these in the middle that you've circled, and it's a 10, that means your group is going to be a very difficult and challenging group. And if you have some that are mixed, let's say motivation is high, but the purpose is uncertain, I guess that would be kind of unlikely, but still possible. But let's say the purpose is certain, motivation is high, but the group is large, okay, and the group is diverse, or there's high turnover, people likely to come and go, uh, then yeah, you'd rather be on the right side, absolutely. But this tells you, it gives you some structure as to where you need to intervene. So when you think about it, it's just a way of diagnosing the issues in your group and what you might need to do to try to improve the situation. And so if size of the group is difficult, you might want to break the group up into smaller groups and have subgroups and give separate assignments to each subgroup. If diversity is large and that's proving to be a problem, you could talk about that directly within the group. and as I said earlier, knowing how people from different areas or cultures or backgrounds contribute to your group, having a discussion about that. So other things are goal clarity. Is the goal ambiguous or clear? Time pressure. Is there limited time or is this ongoing and indefinite? The process, is it structured or unstructured? And the leader's role, is it one of facilitating or transforming or one of controlling? And if the leader sees his or her task as controlling, that's going to be very different. Um, but if everybody expects that and wants that, as we were talking about before, if the leader needs to make decisions, people expect the leader to make decisions, then that makes the job easier for the leader, certainly. And the leader's power, is the leader's power high or low in terms of position power, in terms of expertise? By position power, I mean, is the leader an executive? Is the leader your supervisor? That would mean the person obviously has position power over you and can tell you what to do. If that's not the case, it might be more challenging for the leader. As I said, leading volunteers is like herding cats, let's say. It can be a challenge. So, all right, so the first thing to do is to, just going back, is to, whoops, I'm sorry, consider the group you belong to and analyze that group. What's the challenge likely to be, and what does that mean for the kind of leader you need to become? Okay, the second thing is the elements of a high-performing team. There are three elements to having a high-performing team, and this is really a takeaway from this lecture. If you remember anything, you should remember these 3 points: talent, time, and task. And so it's leading a high-performing team to a large extent is not so much interpersonal or personality, although that's certainly part of it, but it's more concrete than that. It really has to do with having the right people. It has to do with having a time schedule that makes sense and that's clear to everybody, and having goals and a task that's well delineated so that people know what they're there for and what they're going to do. So the more you structure it, the better off you are. Okay, so if you think about the team that you were on, that I asked you to think about a few minutes ago, and that you evaluated using that form, at least in your mind, um, was your group a high-performing team? Did the group members, or do the group members, have the skills, knowledge, and abilities needed for the work? Were the members clear about the group's goals from the start? Did the members have the time to devote to the task? Were they willing to devote the time they needed? Or do they come late to meetings? Did they miss meetings? Did they leave early? And so forth. So you just think about that. If the members really didn't have the skills and knowledge and abilities, then you didn't have the right people there. If the members were never really clear on the goal and why they were there, that obviously is going to be problematic. And if they were not sensitive to time, then that's a problem too. And it's likely that your team was not a high-performing team. Uh, all right, so you need to work on those three aspects to create a high-performing team. You need to be sure that you're identifying the right people. You need to put together a goal and a set of tasks that are concrete, that you know what you're going to do. So putting together that agenda for the meeting is very important. And you need to be sensitive to the time. If meetings are not indefinite, they just don't go on and on. One of the things I've noticed, and this is, I guess, a parenthetical comment, is that in the meetings that we have that are work-related, they're often much more structured. There's a formal agenda, and certainly a time period that's put aside for the meeting. You know, we're going to meet at 3 o'clock, and the meeting's going to be over at 4 because people have other things to do. In volunteer organizations, often that's not the case. If any of you have been a member of a board meeting might start at 7 in the evening and go on and on and on because the leader is not managing it properly and not really focused, and people have their own vested interests and they want to speak their mind, and nothing gets done and people get frustrated and so forth. I think it's much more of a challenge to lead a volunteer organization, a volunteer team, often, and it's one of the things that the leader needs to work on. much more carefully, perhaps, than even a work-related meeting. So, okay, um, these are some of the barriers to team performance created by this concept of virtual distance. And virtual distance could be a function of any of these factors that are listed here on the slide, whether it's geography, as I mentioned before, you might be working across time zones even. Um, that's more and more common today. Uh, Working with people in different parts of the city, if not multiple cities or even countries. Different organizations, the size of your team, having competing tasks that get in the way, and so you're not focused on just one thing. Not having sufficient technical skill and support can be a problem. Uh, Not understanding the interdependence between members and how one member to get his or her task done needs to wait for other people to get their work done. Interpersonal relationships, personality clashes, past history, people not liking each other, and so on. Differences in culture and not understanding each other's cultures, and social aspects. These are all interpersonal sorts of things. Can be barriers to creating a high performing team that you need to diagnose and then work on overcoming. Some of them are easier to do. So if you're talking about size of the group, well, you can, as I said before, you could break it up. You can not create a group that's too large to begin with. That can be helpful. You can understand the tasks that have to be done and how they fit together better. And if you have people on your team who have other things to do that are very important and need to get done, then they probably shouldn't be on your team if they can't really devote the time they need to the task. Having technical skill and support, well, for this, even this session, for example, Nadia relies on our teaching, learning, and technology um, office, Paul St. Dennis and others perhaps, to help with this technology. And if you don't have these people helping and working in the background, it's going to be very, very difficult. And so you need to have the kind of technical support in order to be effective. Okay. And I've just listed some of these interventions. And by the way, this part of it, this concept of virtual distance, comes out of the work of Karen Sobel Lojeski. Karen Lojeski is a faculty member at Stony Brook in the School of the Department of Technology and Society in the College of Engineering, and she is also an industrial psychologist, as am I. And we actually work together and work with some of the same people in our prior lives. And she's done research on this concept of virtual distance and talks about these different points here as being things that you can do to overcome virtual distance in your team and your organization and be more effective as a result. So the first one is smoother asynchronous communications. That means email or a blog, or you're conveying information over time to people, not in real time, but not conveying mixed messages, sending emails about the time of the meeting and not confusing people, being sure they know where they have to go, where the meeting is, when it is, what the agenda is, and so forth. Developing a common identity among the members. I talked about that before, so that people really get to know each other pretty quickly and that they know what they have to contribute to the team. Dividing your team into subgroups, into different areas so that different aspects of the task get done, and particularly if you have a large group, that can be effective. Um, the Stony Brook is doing that right now and working on its strategic plan. We have a new president, and all of the colleges are working on their strategic plan, and within the colleges they've divided up into subcommittees focusing on education, research, and community outreach. And this has been spelled out. This is how you should organize your strategic plan, form these subcommittees, and come back with a report from each subcommittee. Um, Check on conference attendees, ensure engagement and attentiveness, and that's kind of what we do here. I haven't done enough of it, but uh, I could do more by asking questions and stopping. Are you listening to me? Do you have any questions that you want to ask? And this is a way to bring people's attention back to the team. Um, and let's see, easy to learn, user-friendly, little support needed, backup available. So all of those things in terms of what people need to do, what they need to know, could be ways of trying to overcome virtual distance. Okay, does anybody have any questions at this point, talking about checking on understanding and following it? If you have any questions, let me know. So I'll pause for just a second. Yeah, and Nadia is reminding me that we can prepare another poll. You could ask the second question. In fact, in a few minutes, we will talk about the fable. Yeah. So, what would you say is the most difficult aspect of leading a team? Now that we've been talking about it for a while, uh, and I'll let you vote, and then we'll see the responses. Excuse me. You're pretty evenly split. A number of you saying people from different disciplines, and the size of the team. So the poll is still open. I'm watching the results. I don't know if you can see the results, but in a minute we have 13 people responding so far. Seen that, 38% of you said people from different disciplines, and okay, yeah, you can see this, and 62% of you saying the size of the group. So yeah, you're right. Size is easier to control. Well, of course, discipline can be controlled in terms of who is invited to the group, to the extent to which you have control over that. And often you do. If you're talking about volunteers, then it's more difficult, of course, because volunteers, yeah, it's harder to say no to a volunteer. Um, some boards have nominating committees, and the nominating committee reviews people who would like to be on the board, and so this is what they look at, and they look at it very seriously. I'm on one such organization that annually has a nominating committee to look at potential board members, and they interview people, and it's almost like getting a job, and they really try to fit them and their interests and personality to the role that they might have on the board. And a lot of people vie for positions on this board. And that's basically what they're doing. They're focusing on having the right talent, having the right people. And as some of you may know, when you don't have the right people, it can be quite detrimental and very difficult to overcome. So, okay, thank you. So let's move on. These are just more interventions. And I'm not going to dwell on this right now, all of these different points. You can read them later at your leisure. But these are ways to overcome virtual distance so that you can work together more effectively. Okay, the third step in planning your group's development has to do with the stages of group development. And if you were to read a book on group dynamics, you would probably see that they would talk about these different stages that any group has over time. And of course, it doesn't happen in necessarily this logical way, but basically, this is what research has found to be pretty typical of most groups, that you begin with some forming and people introduce each other. Over time, there's some storming, there's some people are not sure exactly why they're there or how the group's going to work, and they feel uncomfortable, and maybe they don't like the leader, many of the things we've been talking about already. Norming has to do with the group, particularly a leaderless group, coming up with its own rules of operation, doing that in an explicit way, or sometimes it happens in a Rosa way, where over time you develop patterns of behavior and interaction that become the norms of how you work together. But of course, one way groups develop norms is by adopting some kind of structured procedure. And in a board, for example, it's or kind of club, often you have parliamentary procedure, and so you have a parliamentarian, you have Robert's Rules of Order, and that identifies a lot of ways of coming up with decision-making processes. How you're going to vote, when you're going to vote, making a motion, and so forth. Keeping minutes for the meeting. It's not really the way um, groups work in an organization so much as how they work in a club. Okay. Yeah, and your professor is reminding you that the slides are available for viewing, but not printing. Um, Although I don't have any problem if they want to print them at some point in time. Okay, and as I say, these stages vary in length of time. Um, and sometimes it takes a while to get to the stage of actually performing and getting the work done. Some research says it doesn't really happen until after the group's done about half of its work. And group proceeds over time. They kind of fool around and flounder around. Let's say they don't really have a fixed idea of what they're going to accomplish, and suddenly somebody realizes, the leader realizes, hey, we only have 2 more weeks to do this, and suddenly they coalesce and they come up with a direction and get the work done in a short period of time. And that's research has shown that that happens quite frequently. Of course, it's better if it doesn't, and you avoid that floundering around by having the right time, the right people, and or the right task structure to begin with. Okay, so what can you do at each stage to improve the team's performance on forming, storming, norming, performing, and learning? So here are some interventions, uh, and you come up with some your own ideas certainly, but I've listed some here. I talked about the introductions, and icebreakers are also useful. There are all kinds of icebreakers you can use to get people more comfortable with each other. I've personally not been that comfortable with icebreakers in terms of just fun games that have nothing to do with what we're doing and what the group is doing. But I like the idea of introductions. And one thing that works particularly well, I find, is having people not only describe what their background is. Okay, your PA, you went to such and such a school, you have X years of experience, or whatever it is. But what's their story in terms of where did they grow up? How many brothers and sisters did they have? What was their major? Or did they? I guess what they're. If they're all from the same profession, you will know what their profession is. But was that their major right off the bat? Kind of what are some central elements of their story to make it personal and to take a couple of minutes, not a long period of time, but to have each person go around the room and tell their story. And sometimes it's helpful not to just leave it open ended, but to ask a couple of key questions like where did you grow up? How many brothers and sisters did you have? Where were you? Were you the oldest in the family, youngest? Just kind of give some information and personal background. That's not too revealing. And then, why are you if you're a PA or therapist or physician, whatever, why did you choose that as your profession? Something of that sort helps people. Okay, I see may you may come from a variety of backgrounds, not just a PA, but you might be a physical therapist or others. So I'll try to incorporate that knowledge into my discussion. So all right, so that's an idea anyway for you if you've tried that up. I've seen it work very well. Having people kind of reveal themselves a little bit, and that makes them more comfortable. Okay, storming, where people are not sure of what the vision is and why they're there. You can go round robin and have people give their views of the nature of this task and what's really critical or what has to be done first. What's the priority? And in a brainstorming fashion, perhaps boarding it on a flip chart, giving everybody just a limited period of time in 1 minute, 30 seconds. So that nobody hogs the floor and everybody has a chance to speak if they wish. Um, Norming, you can agree on the methods. I talked about that before. It's parliamentary rule. Um, or you can go to rulesonline.com if you want another set of rules. Uh, are you going to use majority vote, supermajority? Say that, well, we're not going to accept any decision unless 70% of us agree. Um, Brainstorming, where you go around the room and everybody gets a chance to state their ideas without evaluating, nobody evaluating them, but let's get all the ideas, all the options, all the alternatives out on a flip chart. Performing, use methods, hold process discussions. So, what are you going to do in order to get the work done? Maybe you have to have an off-site retreat. Say, okay, well, let's do our planning in an off-site retreat. We're going to get together and we're going to plan the events for next year or whatever it happens to be. And you might want a facilitator. You might want to invite somebody who can help facilitate the meeting and structure it and work with the leader to facilitate it. And there, some organizations, like hospitals, have professional facilitators. I know somebody who does this at Sloan Kettering, for example, and he's their, I'm not sure, I guess he's a director, I was going to say vice president, but he's the director of organization development. And his role is to work with the various teams within the hospital to help them be effective. And he helps leaders of those teams in facilitating their tasks. And then in the end, a group needs to adjourn in a way that's somewhat formal. Thanking everybody for their participation, giving feedback. Let's talk. Let's process how well this group worked, so we can learn from it in the future. Would we do the same thing again? And if yes, what are those elements of the team that we'd want to repeat? And if not, why not? So these are interventions that you can do as a leader at various stages of your team to try to be more effective. Okay, now the fourth step is determining your style of leadership. So I've talked a lot about, and I'm going to ask you a question in a second. I've talked a lot about the structure of the team, and I've said that for a high-performing team, really the central elements are very much determined by having the right people, time, and task. Assuming you've done that, it's true that your own style of leadership can make a difference. So what would you say if I asked you your style of leadership for yourself, if you were to lead a team, if you do lead a team, how would you describe your style of leadership? And why don't you respond to that question. We'll see what some of the responses are in the chat room. Here I'm not giving you any terms. I want you to come up with terms yourselves. Democratic, which means everybody has an equal vote, or you want to hear from everybody. Inclusive, okay, another good term. Situational leadership. Okay, so you've studied leadership and you know that situational leadership means as a leader you need to do different things at different times, depending upon what's necessary. Aggressive, good. You're admitting, yeah, and some people aren't that ready to admit it, but it's important to understand the extent to which you are aggressive. And being aggressive does not necessarily mean being authoritarian. It could mean trying to be proactive, setting an agenda. You can still be democratic and ask people for their input, but you're going to move forward. You're not going to be delayed. You're not going to let others take over for you, but you're going to take control. Organized, good, and goal-oriented, and adaptive, meaning kind of situational too, that you need to change what you do depending upon what's needed. Usually a group at the start will need structure. And so this talent, time, and task, as I said before, you need to organize the group as effectively as possible. So structure is important at the start. Once a group gets going and has really been formed and is working together, often what the group needs then is facilitation and more interpersonal skills. How are you doing? Some nurturing, putting people together who can work together effectively. If something is not going well, you can ask them and you can process it and get people involved. Uh, Leading by example is a good one. Being a role model, putting your, walking the walk, uh, as they say. Um, that's an important element because if you're not present and you're not participating, you don't show your commitment and your motivation, it's unlikely that the people on the team are going to do so. So leading by example is critical. So okay, in terms of leadership style, let's go back to the presentation. Um, I view leadership as a balancing act, and there are three things that you're balancing. First of all, you're considering the individual members in your team and their vested interests. And so, if you're participative, you need to understand that they come with different perspectives, points of view, maybe even goals in mind, and they have different reasons for being there. On the other hand, you want to work toward a common vision and shared goals. So you need to move the group forward and recognize that people have to work on this shared goal that we're trying to accomplish. But at the same time, you want to recognize that they have vested interests and different perspectives. Okay, the second thing that you need to balance is controlling the group or encouraging members to participate in the group process. So on the one hand, just as we've talked about, you need to be aggressive, you need to have an agenda, you need to have the task outlined, you need to know the different elements of the task. But on the other hand, you want people to participate in the process. If you give them the whole thing and they have no input into the direction of the team or the goal, even the goals of the team, and how quickly those goals are accomplished and achieved, then uh, then they may not be committed. They'll say, "What do you need me for? Just tell me what to do. I'll go and do it." So this is another aspect of balance. So it's not one thing or the other, it's a balance. And the third is spending time reflecting on pressures or taking action. Now, as a leader of a team, often you're going to want to get things done. But on the other hand, it's important to step back and ask the group, how are we working together? Can you participate more effectively? Excuse me, that's my phone. Uh, I'll call you back. I'm sorry about that. I'm actually in New Jersey at the moment with a family emergency, and so I needed to answer that, but I'm sorry. Okay, so this is what you can do for each one of those continua. So if you think about balancing vested interests and common goals, you can give members time to express their individual concerns, but at the same time talk about what the common goals are. Secondly, you can balance control and participation. You can control the meeting, or you can encourage participation. And you need to do a little of both, for sure. Give people time to express their views, but at the same time controlling the timing. So, for example, I've used the round robin process quite frequently, where I will um, designate when we're talking about particularly a sensitive issue, where a decision has to be made and the group needs to reach consensus. Give everybody a chance to talk, but not just leave it open-ended, but to say, okay, everybody's got 1 minute, they've got 2 minutes, and actually time it and say, all right, we need to move on. Thank you. If we have time, we'll come back to you later, to give everybody a chance to speak. Um, and then the last one is balancing action and reflection, taking action to respond, but at the same time talking about group process, taking the time out. Make it an explicit time out where you say, we're going to take a few minutes now to talk about how well we're working and whether we could be doing something more effectively. Sorry. Okay. All right, so you get the idea. It's balancing those three continua. Now, I was talking about leadership style. So a leader style relates to those three continua. But we can also talk about a concept which you're probably familiar with, um, transactional and transformational leadership. And there are some well-known people in that who are in the field of leadership who have written about this. And transactional leadership is doing the things that I've listed here: planning, delegating, organizing, providing direction, and so forth, making decisions on your own, fixing problems. And transformational leadership is doing these things I've listed here. It's much more, it's the visioning thing, as they say. It's trying to express a vision that other people can relate to, that people can participate in developing, and that people can feel committed to and want to get on board to accomplish some kind of change. So you do this by fostering open discussion, being open to other ideas and others' opinions, involving others in their transactions, involving others in decisions, and empowering people to fix problems, saying, okay, we've got a problem here. I want to know your view of what the solution might be. Let's talk about possible solutions. Let's look at alternatives. Let's try to make a change. And this might be a good time to talk about the fable and some of the questions from the fable. And maybe you, Nadia, you can put. There were three questions that I raised about the fable. In fact, let's see. Okay, now together a poll about them. Um, self. Uh, Second. Yeah, like what factors stimulated team learning? So that's a good one to start off with. If you remember the fable was about sheep and wolves, and what what stimulated the team of sheep to learn? What would you say? Give you a few minutes to answer, unless you're going to put up some alternatives, Nadia. You could do that, or you could just have them respond in the chat room. You could just respond to that question in the chat. What stimulated their learning? Okay, the loss of other sheep. Yeah, excellent. That was the principal thing. What else? Like fear. That's okay. You don't have to make this a poll, but let's just talk about them. Losing their leader. Yeah. The identification that a problem existed. Just realizing that there was a problem that existed. Um, uh, Okay, that's enough for now. You don't need to make this a poll. Let's go on because there's a second question. Was failure necessary before the team could learn? And why don't you just say this? You could just say yes or no to. So they lost their leader for one thing. They were being eaten, uh, literally. Um, could the team have learned without that failure? What do you think? Does it take some kind of cataclysmic event to before learning can occur, before change can occur, before a team can be transformed? So yes or no. So it's about 50-50 here. Some of you saying about yeah, a few more changing their minds and saying that no, maybe a team can learn without failure. One would hope that, wouldn't you? Would have saved a few lives of the sheep. And you can think of other failures that we've had in whether it's in the country or I suppose within the work setting that we didn't seem to learn until there was some kind of catastrophe that occurred, whether it's 9/11 or anything else. Um, But on the other hand, others of you saying, yeah, maybe that's what does it. You really you can't engender transformation without failure. Okay. Without the leader or without failure? Well, I'm saying without failure. Um, in other words, without being eaten alive, without some kind of catastrophe happening. Do you need a catastrophe? Do you need some kind of failure in order to stimulate team learning and transformation? And so most of you are saying no, at least 7 of you. and the rest of you are saying yes. And then let me ask one last question, which you can, yeah, not always, but you can answer this in the chat room. What did the group learn in this fable? What did the team learn? I'll give you a minute or so. I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute to respond. While you're doing that, I will look at my. Yeah, we're finished with the polls. Okay, they learned to think outside the box. Yes, definitely. They learned to go against the status quo. Yeah, absolutely. They learned to do things differently. But they had the skills with the group to solve the problem. They looked for choices. They kind of saw their environment differently. They, what was right in front of them all the time that they didn't see, they suddenly saw. Working together to reach a certain goal, yeah, one person contributing an idea that another person took up, or person, sheep, as the case may be, uh, and working within the group. Yeah, it was really, I mean, it was a good fable, an intriguing fable, I think, because it was one that demonstrated problems. It demonstrated the fear and the inaction of not really um, working effectively together and understanding that they could think out of the box. And it wasn't until they met catastrophe that they were able to observe what was going on and change. Now, what do you think? Again, in the chat room, uh, they learned that would help them in the future. Do you think that as they move on to another issue or another problem, and the sheep move to whether it's another venue, another pasture, if you will, or another problem, do you think that they're going to be able to transfer what they learned in this case to a different situation? So they learned teamwork. They learned how to analyze the situation. Good. They learned that other routes could be taken to solve a problem. Absolutely. Maybe they learned something about perception and trying to get out on the table. What is it that we see happening here? Let's look at all of these elements and analyze them. And that they shouldn't take for granted that it has to be one way. They learned analysis and how to analyze the situation. And that's kind of what we do in these structured problem-solving teams and quality improvement teams, where we've learned that you take it one step at a time. You analyze the work process. What are the elements? You analyze the problems that occurred. What are their frequency? You analyze what are the potential reasons for those problems. Let's list them. And you then try to identify the most frequent problems and focus on the elements that create those problems or might create those problems and make a change, intervene, and see if it has an effect. Very structured process that this team of sheep didn't have before, and that other routes can be taken to solve a problem. It's not just one way. So that it was, in that sense, a meaningful fable, one that really focuses on transformation as well as transaction, and how you become an envisioning leader. And sometimes the leader has to become lunch before the group is ready to learn. And again, you hope that doesn't happen. It does happen, in situations in organizations where the leader actually ends up being sacrificed or being the scapegoat, if you will, and then the team learns as a result. But that's not an effective way of doing business, of course. So what kind of leader should you be? It depends on what you feel comfortable doing, and it depends on what's needed in the organization. So it's a combination of those two. You may be largely a transactional leader. You like to keep things organized. You like the structure of it. You like to tell people what to do, perhaps. You like to make assignments and delegate. You follow up. And all of those are very important. certainly for any type of task. But also, uh, do you feel comfortable as a transformational leader? Do you feel that do you feel that's a risk? Is it a risk in terms of opening yourself up for ideas that you might not want um, to know about, or maybe that you just don't want other people to have influence over because you are the leader? So being a transformational leader suggests that you are open to new ideas, that you want people to be committed to a common vision, that you want their input in creating that common vision. And that's not, not everybody feels comfortable doing that. So you need to think for yourself, what kind of leader do you want to be? What kind of leader are you most comfortable being? And what's needed by that group at that given time? And it might depend on the stage of the group is in, as I said earlier. It might depend on the people you have in that team, particularly if they were selected for one reason, let's say their talent, their expertise maybe, but maybe not their personalities. And so you really need to know, you need to diagnose what the group needs. So going back to that initial step, you have to think about the kind of group that you have and what that group really needs. Okay, so this might be a good time to focus and kind of bring this to a conclusion. We've been doing this for like an hour and a half. I can go on talking forever, but got a few things to attend to here. But so I'd like to kind of focus it on what you've learned so far. What action steps would you take to increase the performance of a team that you are on? So we've talked earlier about the challenges you face, and we've talked about the kind of leader you are. We've talked about the steps to an effective team, including talent, time, and task. And we've talked about those continua, balancing vested interests against having a common vision, and taking time out to process what's going on versus taking action. The three continua that I talked about earlier. Uh, what do you feel you would do to increase the performance of a team that you are on, given what we've been talking, given the discussion so far? Yeah, you could do that in a chat. Yeah. Paul is asking me a question. Okay. Be more aware of the dynamics of the group. Okay, so that's one thing that you could do. And by dynamics, I guess you mean how people are working together, how they're talking, what they're saying to each other, whether they are meeting obligations. Solicit feedback about the goals. Um, Excellent. And make sure that we're all on the same page. Yeah, that's a very important element. Uh, because people might have different perspectives of what's going on in the group and what they think they're accomplishing and might not see it in the same way. The round robin, good. That's as I said, that can work pretty well. The idea is to get everyone's own agenda on the table. Absolutely, letting everyone have a voice. An icebreaker exercise, good, particularly at the start of a team, and it can also be good midway too, because if the group doesn't seem to have coalesced, it's often good to have a break, take time out to do some kind of icebreaker. So that story idea, or going around the room to introduce yourself, you can do that really at any time. It's effective if you do it at the start, but you could. It's fine to do it at another point in time, particularly if you haven't done it. Work together and listen to the different perspectives. members having the right skill set, and continuity of communication, meaning keeping people involved. All of those things, are certainly important. Um, and let me ask one last question. You could put this in a poll, Paul and Nadia. If you were to describe your leadership style, would you say it is transactional? Would you say it is transformational? Or would you say it's a combination of the two? Reading the last comment in the chat room, defining each member's role toward the achievement of the goal set. Yeah, that's really important. As I said, that's important at the outset as well as you're moving forward. Okay, so and it depends on the situation. Absolutely. Situational leadership makes sense, but that means that you have to be a good diagnostician. You really got to be thinking about what's going on in the team. And it's helpful to have a facilitator to work with or other people, certainly on the team, to ask them. You can respond to this poll, and let's see how you view yourself. Transactional, transformational, or, yeah, situational. Now, be objective, self-objective, I should say. Yeah, and I hope that's the case. Excellent. So 12 of you so far, 12 of you responding that you are situationally based and that you really understand what the group needs, and you take the time to think about what the group needs and to behave that way, to be the kind of leader that the group needs at the time. And if you can do that, more power to you. I congratulate you. That's certainly the best way to the best kind of leader you can be. It's not easy, though, I'll tell you that, and does take a lot of work. It takes being very conscientious and often being frustrated because the members of your team may not be exactly where you are at a given point in time. So you might have to work with different people in different ways. Okay, so Professor Dimitrov is suggesting, what do you think the sheep learned? So why don't you respond to that? What do you think the sheep learned in our fable? We talked about what the team learned. As an individual sheep, as an individual member, sheep might not be the best word because members of teams are not necessarily sheep, but nevertheless, change is possible. So you as an individual learn that it is possible to change, and that's okay. I mean, that's a good thing. Good for me as a member of a team, as well as for the team as a whole. You might learn that you can rely on other members of your team and that other people have good ideas. You might learn that good to take time out to observe and discuss what we're seeing. The sum of the parts can be greater than the whole, absolutely. And maybe that there's some sheep that has a dream, has a vision that things can be better. And it took a while for the other sheep to understand that. There are different ways to achieve something. It's not always about going with the norm or working in one way. Yeah. And there is this distinction between group learning and individual learning. So here we're talking about you and what you learned, but also the team, as we talked about earlier. The team learned. So people learned to interact with each other. They learned transactions that will serve them well in the future. And that was that question about what are they going, will this transfer to the future? There are different ways to achieve something. It's not always about going with the norm. Absolutely. Okay. So with that, I guess let me thank you. and I appreciate your attention. I hope that you found this useful. The slides, I think, will be available to you in the future.